So you know how Disney has this lineup of iconic, adorable cartoon characters like Mickey Mouse and Goofy that they barely use in TV or movies, instead choosing to just slap them on any merchandise they can? Sanrio is kinda like that, except that the cute character merchandise thing is the whole reason the company exists, and all of their work in film and TV has come about as a direct result of that merchandise's success. You probably know them for this cat, as seen on the cover of many bad video games, every kind of stationery, clothing item, and accessory ever conceived by man, and of course the screens that will lull us into a false feeling of calm in our dystopian nightmare future. Sanrio first got into the film business in 1977, with two cute animated features about talking animals, and an American documentary about a big adopted family that won an Academy Award. Which means that yes, the embodiment of Japanese commercialism beat the god emperor of anime to that particular punch by almost 2.5 decades. Although, to be fair, they were helped by the guy who made Snoopy. Sanrio's characters have become so widespread and ingrained in not just Japanese culture, but global culture as a whole, that in 1983, Hello Kitty became the official mascot of the United Nations charity, UNICEF. And if you can't see why that's a big deal, consider that Akira didn't come out until 1988. Sanrio was a truly global media brand at a time when you couldn't even put anime on television without giving it the old Speed Racer Translux treatment. Sanrio's character artists have a remarkable talent for condensing a feeling, emotion, or concept into a few simple shapes and colors, a talent that they mostly use to appeal to kids and especially to young girls. But recently they've been venturing out of that highly lucrative comfort zone to create more mature, adult characters and stories, like Gudetama, an adorable egg on toast whose primary personality trait is that he's overwhelmingly chronically depressed. Sanrio has also been making ventures into serious anime for serious people, and while their first two efforts, Show by Rock and Sanrio Danshi, didn't quite click with me, their new Netflix original series, Aggretsuko, really did. And judging by how much buzz there's been around the series online, I don't think that I'm the only person feeling that by a long shot. Which is kinda surprising, since out of all the anime for adults that Sanrio has produced so far, Aggretsuko is the least adult looking of the bunch by far. Although looking at some of my other recent favorites, I've clearly got a fetish for beleaguered Japanese office ladies, so maybe that's not surprising at all. Aggretsuko, short for Aggressive Retsuko, is another cute animal mascot, much like Hello Kitty. But instead of representing cute, girly innocence, Retsuko represents the harsh realities of wage-slave working life. She's a hard-working, hard-drinking red panda accountant stuck in an office filled with self-centered jerks who blows off steam after hours by singing death metal karaoke about how much her life sucks. The Netflix anime tells, in easily digestible 15-minute chunks, the story of Retsuko's attempts to somehow escape her terrible job and find happiness. And spoiler alert, none of them work. Across 10 episodes, she jumps from one unrealistic escapist fantasy to another, first dreaming about leaving her job to work with her irresponsible friend's import store, which is less of a real store and more of an eBay page, then about getting hot, marrying a rich guy, and quitting to be a housewife. And then there's the ridiculous fantasy that reporting your literal sexist pig of a boss to HR can somehow get him to change his ways. That's hilarious. Every time, Retsuko is smacked down by the reality that life is just hard and there are no easy outs for that. But she also gradually comes to see that everyone around her, from the jerks who give her trouble to the people she looks up to, are also having a hard time and doing the best they can to cope with their own flaws. So even if she just has to deal with shit and take her happiness where she can, she's not alone in that. It's a very nuanced human story, which may sound strange to say because aesthetically, it's as simple and cartoony as anime gets, and there's not a single human in sight. But I think that's why it works. Aggretsuko is a cartoon for adults, but not in the same way as cynical, vulgar adult cartoons like Family Guy and South Park. It's not just an adult comedy with animated visuals. Rather, it takes the same lens of straightforward, simplified, honest storytelling that children's cartoons like Arthur apply to childhood and points it at the more complicated problems of adult life, like lazy coworkers who use their seniority as an excuse to make you do their work for them, or catching drunk feelings for someone who's actually a bit of a boring, thoughtless jerk, which are just as valuable subjects for simplified cartoon lessons as dealing with bullies, or getting a dog, or getting glasses for the first time. But they're things that nobody ever really sits down to talk through in that way. As adults, we're mostly just expected to figure this shit out on our own. But Aggretsuko tries to change that by providing helpful answers to those problems in a friendly, easygoing, and entertaining manner. That gives the show show a lot of value. As in many classic kids cartoons, the over-the-top, on-the-nose presentation of these concepts makes them really easy to process and digest. Like when Retsuko falls into her crush on Risasuke, the whole world literally transforms into a sea of pink and hearts and rainbows. His bland face physically morphs in her mind into the face of a quiet, thoughtful, handsome dude, and his voice becomes deeper as he speaks. It's not at all subtle, but it is a very accurate depiction of how a crush can basically blind you to your problems, both with the object of your affection and the world around you, and how that can be a good thing in the short term, but an absolute nightmare in the long term. This series makes sure that we never get too caught up in Retsuko's lovey-dovey fantasy by frequently cutting from her and Risasuke to her friend Haida, who is in pain because of the feelings that he has for her. From Retsuko's perspective, falling in love is an uncompromisingly happy and good thing, but because of how it's structured narratively, the show leaves us feeling as though something must be off, which is, of course, paid off when we see Risasuke act like an inconsiderate jagoff constantly, while still being viewed through Retsuko's rose-colored glasses. For as simple as it looks at first glance, the direction, editing, and especially writing in this show are all top-notch. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about the character puns, though those are pretty god tier, like Washimi, the CEO's secretary, is literally a secretary bird. Tsunoda, the doe, makes doe eyes at Tone, the chauvinist pig. Tone's lackey Komiya is a literal weasel, and I could go on. This is not an analysis of animal puns, but I did want to take a second to appreciate how clever some of these characters and their designs really are. The trick that makes the show work so well is that while everyone is introduced as a flat, cartoonish caricature of some office stereotype or another, every last person who gets any degree of screen time is revealed to have a lot more going on under the surface. Washimi and Gori, the confident, powerful businesswomen who Retsuko looks up to, are still dealing with their own insecurities and frustrations, even as close as they are to the top of the corporate ladder. Their professional faces at work are an act that they put on, and like Retsuko herself, they really just need friends to share their troubles and relax with. Best girl Feneko presents herself as a detached and cynical social media maven, but despite her snarky attitude, she cares really deeply for her best friends, Haida and Retsuko, and when a cute guy flirts with her, she can't help getting super into it. Yazi was shouting at the screen, "She's literally me," every single episode, especially during the singles mixer, so there's some circumstantial evidence that she's a very realistic and relatable character. Speaking of the mixer, Tsunoda the doe, who organizes it, shows a lot of depth as well when she's alone with Retsuko. Despite appearing at first glance to be nothing more than a simpering suck-up, she shows a surprising amount of emotional intelligence and a genuine desire to brighten everyone else's day, even the people she doesn't like, because she reasons that if they're a bit less grumpy, everybody around her wins. She's also genuinely happy that Retsuko wants to hang out with her because she knows her sucking up to the boss can make other people, like Feneko, look down on her and ultimately leave her short on friends. In one scene, this fake sweet liar who we've spent this entire series waiting for the other shoe to drop on transforms into an immensely likable, empathetic person, all without actually changing. We just see another side of her. Megumi, the office's big-mouthed gossip, draws the line at spreading rumors that could seriously hurt someone's career, even if she's a bit too naive to actually make that judgment call correctly, and also she's probably a secret agent, which is pretty cool in its own right. Even Tone, the monstrous misogynist who functions as Retsuko's primary antagonist for most of the series, is shown to have a good side, one that is remarkably pretty much the same side as his bad side. The fact that he's a self-proclaimed bastard who doesn't hesitate to, quote, tell it like it is, means that he can actually get through to Retsuko about her self-destructive relationship with Risasuke, when everyone else who's dancing around the issue and trying not to hurt her feelings can't. Also, how cool is it that the job Retsuko sees as destroying her life, accounting, serves as the metaphor that lets her finally understand how much she's actually destroying her life by settling for Risasuke. That is some really good writing right there. Anyway, the dude could stand to take a chill pill or 20 and maybe read some feminist literature or just watch Mad Max Fury Road a couple times sometimes, but even Tone's surly, regressive, self-centered outlook on life has some value for him and those around him. Probably a lot of value for the company, actually, looking at the guy's mad accounting skills when the chips are down. Which brings up one more example of excellent writing. The abacus that serves as a symbol of Tone's status as a stubborn relic of a bygone age allows him to substantially outperform everyone else who's using computers to do the same task. It may not be the best tool for the job, but it works for him, and that's why he's not gonna change. Not just because he's an inexplicably stubborn asshole. Tone is probably the least likable character in the entire cast, yet we and Retsuko still come to understand him by the end of the show, feeling a complicated mixture of love and hatred for him, just like we do for the kinda mean, backwards-thinking people in our own lives who we know too well to see as pure monsters. You know, like that grandma who's really sweet and caring, generally speaking, but refers to people of color who she actually likes as the good ones. I could go on and on talking about the great characters in this series, but this video has to end at some point, and before it does, I really want to talk about Retsuko and Haida, because they're both so well written that it demands closer examination. Like everyone else in the series, Retsuko is a lot more complicated than the show initially lets on. For starters, despite how put upon she acts and how much crap she goes through, she's just as self-centered as everyone else around her. She does a lot of things for other people, but it's mostly just because it's easier for her not to say no to them, and she's kinda bad at seeing the human being underneath her stereotype perception of others. We discover things about these characters simultaneously as Retsuko does, but we've known them for a couple hours at most, while she's been around some of them for what, like 5 years now? It's only the self-inflicted threat of losing the job that she hates, but which pays her bills a lot better than a passion project would, that forces her to get to know her coworkers on a more than superficial level, which lets her take better care of herself and be more empathetic towards others. She's so self-obsessed that as soon as she starts daydreaming about nabbing herself a rich hubby, her first thought is to ask Haida, who's obviously got feelings for her, whether or not he'd want her to work if they were married. Then, when she doesn't get an answer she wants, she immediately ducks out of the conversation, never bringing it up again, while Haida's left to think about it constantly from that point on. This is just one of many inconsiderate things that Retsuko does while worrying about her own shit, which is kinda the point of the show, really. Everyone is dealing with their own stuff, and everyone has unfair expectations of others. Everyone is a line in someone else's angry heavy metal karaoke solo, metaphorically speaking. Even Gori, a very strong woman who does a lot to support Retsuko emotionally, has nights where she just needs to crash at a friend's place and keep them up with a night of crying. Life is all about trying our hardest to do right by ourselves without doing wrong by anything else, and we all mess that up from time to time. And that brings us to Haida, who is, I think, one of the best written love interests in anime. At first glance, Haida just seems like a nice guy. Sorry, that's nice guy in big quotes with a trademark at the end. He likes Retsuko, but he doesn't have the guts or self-confidence to tell her, so instead he contrives ways to spend time with her in groups and tries to ply her with favors and decidedly unsexy niceties. He won't actually ask her out, yet he'll ask Feneko to get in the way if other guys do. Looking at his character design, he's clearly just as frazzled and exhausted from the job as Retsuko is, so I figured that towards the end of the series we'd come to understand that his crush on her is a coping mechanism just like the ones that she's been using. Instead, they do something much better with his character though. When push comes to shove and Retsuko starts dating Risasuke, Haida has the emotional maturity to actually recognize that he's got nobody to blame but himself for not asking her out sooner. Sure, he's still mad and jealous, and he says that he wants to punch Risasuke, which he even does symbolically, but ultimately he beats himself up for it first and foremost. He tries his hardest to give Retsuko space to be happy, which confirms that 1, he's a genuinely good guy, not a fake, and 2, that he actually loves her, and that this isn't just some kind of shallow crush. Narratively speaking, the anime is showing us why Haida could be good for Retsuko, while also demonstrating to any dudes who might be watching what healthy healthy, respectful affection really looks like. And like the best kids cartoons, it lets the audience reach their own conclusions about this message, along with every other message in the show, while still making it easy to understand, but without beating us over the head with it. Which is good because it gives me, as the guy pedantically breaking down the series in an internet video, something to do. Thanks, Sanrio, and please don't copyright claim this. Anyway, while that's going on in the narrative, the show is visually reinforcing the idea that Haida is a genuinely good match for Retsuko in a subtle way, namely with Haida's apartment and casual street clothes. While he's not in his work suit, Haida dresses like a punk rocker, and it's implied that he uses punk music to cope with his life the same way that Retsuko uses metal to cope with hers. That's a thing that they'll probably bond over, if, as the ending of the show implies, they do end up going to karaoke together at some point in the future. When he finally asks her out, Haida himself acknowledges that he's really just in love with the idea of Retsuko that he's built up in his head. But from the omniscient perspective of the audience, we see that they're a match in more ways than either of them realize. Risasuke, by contrast, has a room full of potted plants, because that's kinda what he is. But beyond the on-the-nose metaphor there, that implies that gardening is a genuine hobby for him, and that he does have stuff going on beyond his bland persona. He's not the right guy for Retsuko, clearly, but maybe there's someone out there for him, and hey, look, this silly, simple cartoon has me actively imagining what other characters will do off-screen now that the story is over. And they're clearly defined enough that I can use evidence from the show as a basis for that speculation. This is what strong, three-dimensional human characters look like. Flat 2D animals. And that, to me, is why Aggretsuko works as so much more than just a cynical, pointed piece of short-form office culture satire. It goes out of its way to humanize everyone and make it seem like they have lives beyond the screen with the kind of writing depth that we expect from an adult-oriented show, yet it makes it all easy to swallow with the straightforward honesty of a children's cartoon, teaching lessons about how to live and just be around other people that you can't really get anywhere else. And I don't know about you guys, but that was something that I didn't know I needed until Netflix gave it to me. So rock on, Aggretsuko. Rock on. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.